I will fear no evil. It's the little phrase tucked in the middle of Psalm 23, verse 4, that we want to focus in on today. The first part of that verse says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. We talked about that on Wednesday, and if you'd like, you can see that on our YouTube channel or hear the audio on our website. We all go through valleys. We all are going to face that darkness and those difficulties. And one of those difficulties that I remember very well was in Georgia when our oldest son was about 3, maybe he was more like 2.5, 3 years old, right in that range. We were in the basement on the backside of a strip shopping center. That's where our little church plant was worshiping at the time. And somehow, some way, our son found his way out the door, up the driveway, across a 4-lane road, and to a gas station where there was a little convenience store. We didn't notice this at first because we were greeting everybody after our church service when a nice sheriff brought him back over to us. Every parent's biggest fear, right? Your child gets away and you don't know where they are. Well, what I remember, it seems so funny that we even got fearful, but just we were behind the whole scene, but I just remember my eyes getting big as saucers, like, you did what? You went where? How are you? All those emotions just going there. And he's holding on to the sheriff saying, like, I'm fine, Dad. My sheriff friend has me. And I wonder if just perhaps, if we've ever had a moment of fear or difficulty, if we can possibly relate to that. And I would imagine it's one of the more universal experiences for us, which is probably why the Bible over 100 times tells us, do not fear, don't be afraid, fear not, have courage. Oftentimes those are spoken by God or by one of God's angels or one of God's leaders, telling us not to fear and to fear not. We'll explore this coming Wednesday the connection to fear not in this passage in the 23rd Psalm, but my whole premise of going through this with you for Lent has been the idea that Jesus himself walked through the 23rd Psalm. He went through these experiences, and because he did, he can teach us something. He can show us the way, even as he makes the way of salvation by his life and death on the cross. And as I studied this, a very interesting thing occurred to me. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit this, but after 30 years of being a pastor, studying the scriptures, I learned something new about Jesus this week. And maybe, just maybe, I'll be teaching you something new about Jesus too. I want you to think of some of the stories that you know about him. We'll address and explore a lot of these in Bible study today, but how about when Jesus first goes into the temple? The first time, when he was 12 years old, and his parents lose him and have that same experience that I had as a parent, missing our son. And they're all fearful and upset and worried, where are you? Jesus wasn't afraid that he was missing his parents for 3 days, which seems kind of remarkable. He wasn't afraid at all. He said, why were you afraid? I had to be here in my Father's house. How about the next time we hear that Jesus comes to his Father's house? It's the Passover. His ministry has begun. He sees people buying and selling and doing what Scripture describes as turning his house, his Father's house, into a den of robbers. Is Jesus afraid? You shouldn't be doing that in my Father's house. That's wrong. He'll be upset. The Bible reports Jesus was angry and zealous because his Father's house wasn't being treated right. How about when Jesus' dearest friend Lazarus is dying and he goes and meets with Lazarus' sisters? We explored that a little bit on Wednesday night. Was Jesus, what was he? He was sad. He was weeping. Those who saw it said, look how much he loved him, as Jesus sighed. Or perhaps the most famous one of all, Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, when he says to his disciples, I need you to pray for me. My soul is overwhelmed and troubled and sorrowful, even to the point of death. I need you to pray for me. So we hear him angry We hear him sad. We hear of Jesus sorrowful and troubled. You know what I discovered this week? Jesus was never afraid. I invite you to look through the Gospels. See if you can find it. I couldn't. And I've searched it over and over. I can't find a time that Jesus was afraid. Fear or being afraid never describes Jesus. Now you might say, soul overwhelmed with trouble and sorrowful. What is that exactly? Maybe aware, as the comedian once said, it's not death that I'm afraid of, it's the process. Maybe Jesus was considering what the pain was going to be like. But I want to suggest to you that the sorrow he feels right there is because he knows intellectually he's about to experience something he's never experienced. And also, I think it's because by doing it, he made it so you and I never have to experience it. What am I talking about? Jesus knows he's about to experience something he's never experienced. He's about to be separated from his Father's love. He's about to be separated from the one who loved him, who said from his baptism on, "You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased." He's about to be separated from the Father as Jesus goes alone to be the sin bearer for us on the cross. And intellectually, he knows I'm about to be apart from the one who's loved me and sustained me. I'm about to no longer have that communion, that intimacy and closeness with the Father as I go to be a substitute for mankind. But he hasn't actually felt it yet. He knows it intellectually, but he doesn't know it yet in experience. And the thought of what he'll have to go through makes him sorrowful, makes him troubled. But I would suggest to you it does not make him afraid. It doesn't make him afraid. Let's turn from Jesus' fear for a minute and think about our own fear. To get us there, maybe you think about the disciples, if you can, for a moment. The disciples in a boat in the middle of a storm with waves blowing over them and threatening to sink the boat, and they are afraid. You ever felt like that? The circumstances hitting you so hard, the things washing over, and in our fear, don't we say things like this? Oh no, what will I do? What's going to happen to me? Fear has a way of making us feel very alone. Pain can do that too, but fear especially. I think we fear what we don't know, and then we also, in that fear, we wonder, since I don't know how it's going to end up, I don't know what's going to happen to me, fear and anxiety and worry rises up. Think back to some of the decisions that you've ever made in fear. Maybe it was things you bought or people that you started to trust in that you normally would not have trusted in or normally would not have bought. But fear had our minds gripped, so we made choices we wouldn't have made otherwise because we were worried, what am I going to do? I got to do something. I got to grab something. In the Old Testament reading, the psalmist faces fearful situations. I don't know if you can recall it, but he was writing in there, and we heard Milton read it for us just to go back to that again. He describes there, many are my foes, many rise up against me, and many even say, oh, God can't even deliver him. Many things to fear, many circumstances. But the writer of the psalm, David, says, but you are the one who delivers me. I have many things I could be afraid of, but you are the one, Lord, who delivers me. You are the one who is that shield and who shelters me. And those disciples were in that boat afraid. You know who else was in the boat with them? You probably remember. Jesus was there. Anybody picture Jesus going, oh no, what are we going to do? What's going to happen to me? Anybody picture going, Peter, don't you have a life raft stuffed inside this boat somewhere? You picture Jesus doing that? No. If you remember the story, you know what I'm about to say. If you don't, you might be surprised to know that what Jesus was doing was resting in peace. He was asleep in the back of the boat. Why was he asleep? Well, I think he tells us when he wakes up. When he wakes up and the disciples are grabbing, don't you care if we drown? What's going to happen to us? He asked them, why are you afraid? Don't you believe? Don't you believe that there are, yes, many troubles out there, but don't you believe even more than in the troubles? Believe in the one who is your deliverer? In other words, Jesus knew until that moment in the garden, until that moment when he is sorrowful and troubled, he knew that the Father was always with him. He knew he had nothing to fear. He had no evil to fear because no evil was going to overcome Jesus, because no evil could overcome the goodness that is in God the Father. I love how Romans 12 puts it, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And Jesus, who does the ultimate good on the cross by giving his life in place of yours and mine. Jesus, who does the ultimate good, overcomes all the evil, overcomes all the accusations, overcomes all the fear of what evil could do to us, or anything that fear can try to do to us, all the ways it tries to lie to us and deceive us, or the enemy uses that fear to peel us apart from God. Jesus, in the gospel reading, describes this fear for us. And instead of fear saying, oh, what's going to happen to me, Jesus says, I know the Father loves me. I know he's there. I know he cares. When the Pharisees come and they say, hey, Herod wants to kill you. You should be afraid. Get out of here. He says, I'm not afraid. I'm going to go keep doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to go keep doing the work the Father has given me to do. I'm going to go keep showing his love. If there's any emotion that you see there in that gospel reading, I think it was sorrowfulness. Jesus was sorrowful because he's like, Jerusalem and Israelites and people of this world, I'm doing all this for you. I'm coming like a mother hen wants to gather her fearful little chicks under her wings. I'm coming to offer protection and peace to you. And more often than not, you are not willing. That's what he says. I've come to gather, like a hen gather her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. The emotion Jesus has there is not fear, but sadness for what we lose when we let fear, when we let struggles, when we let our own self-centered orientation, what will I do? What's going to happen to me? When we let that kick in. Jesus knew the Father loved him, and that's why he could say, I fear no evil. Now, let's be real practical for a minute. I can't make scary circumstances go away. I can't stop it so no one in this room or no one watching this or listening to this is ever going to have cancer, is ever going to face difficulty or struggle. Things in this world will happen to us. But what we can do, even as we're going through that, is instead of saying, what will I do? What's going to happen to me? I think what we can do is say, Jesus, I believe you care. I believe you're close. I believe you love me. I believe you can help me persevere through these trials. As James talked about it, blessed are the ones, so many blessings for those who persevere. Persevere in the circumstances by remembering that we're loved. By remembering that the Father who was willing to let his Son be separated from him will never let anything separate you from his love. When you hear that list in Romans 8 of death, life, angels, demons, anything in the heights and anything in the past, present, or future, nothing can separate us from his love. So with that assurance, let us fear no evil. The circumstances may come, but we don't need to fear any evil because God will be there with us in the circumstances. God will be there with his loving presence. God will be there to bring us even through anything this world thinks of or the devil could throw at us, to bring us through it. I walk through that valley of the shadow of death, and I will fear no evil because of his love, because of his promises, because of what Jesus endured for me. I hope that we can remember, even when we are going through tough times, we don't need to fear evil. God is greater than anything we will face, and God's deliverance for you will be greater still. May He strengthen us. May He fill us with hope and courage, not so that we're so strong on our own, but we are so strengthened when we hold on to Him.